Good day, everybody, and happy Fearless Friday. When we put ourselves out there, be it for a job interview, selling our new business, or as we are building our personal brand, an important element comes into play with that, and that is feedback or criticism. Because you're making changes, you're doing new things, you are putting yourself out there. So how do you deal with becoming that vulnerable and the shame you might feel when you are putting yourself out there and when people are saying things that are not so great? Well, I am chatting about personal branding today, but really the element of how to get yourself ready for facing conflict and feedback when you are building your personal brand. And I even have a script template that I'm sharing with you today that you can use when you need to look back and deal with this type of comment and feedback that you are getting from people around you. So the topic is what to do when you get feedback after putting yourself out there, how to change constructive feedback into a win. And like I said, there's a script at the end. Dale Carnegie said, "Any fool can criticize, condemn, and complain, but it takes character and self-control to be understanding and forgiving." So a very big fear that I have seen a lot of people have around building a personal brand is the backlash or feedback that we fear from others. I'm not going to put myself out there because what are people going to say about me? Or what if I fail? Or even, what if I am not good enough? I've heard all of these before. I've felt these. We are so afraid of what others think of us that we suppress our own greatness, our awesomeness, because we fear of not fitting in. We fear of not being the same as others. This is a mindset block that has been ingrained into us through advertising, media, and businesses all around us and throughout our lives. We are made to think that we need to fit into a certain mold, and when we don't, that there is something wrong with us, and we get negative feedback or criticism. But when you are being a thought leader, an innovator, and you are building your personal brand, you do not have to fit in. And people will have something to say about it because ultimately they are scared to even try it themselves. The greatest risk is not even trying. So let me start by saying we all have fears. Yes, we all have fears. But guess what? They're not going to go away unless you do something about it. But they shouldn't stop us from putting ourselves out there, especially when we are building our brand and we are driving towards success. Because it is so needed for your audience, your customers, your network to get to know you. And they do that when you are clear about what and who your personal brand is. So yes, you will need to embrace the fact that you might need to be vulnerable, but you learn so much from the process. And by receiving feedback, you can actually become better and serve your audience stronger. So first of all, it's important to know that there are two types of criticism, namely constructive and then obviously destructive. And it's important to recognize the difference between the two so you can handle it and use it and learn from it. When challenged by another person, it is common to react in a negative manner. But it's important to also consider how negative reactions make you look in return, and more importantly, how they make you feel. The way in which you choose to handle criticism or feedback has a knock-on effect in various aspects of your life. Therefore, it is better to identify in ways in which you can benefit from the criticism and use it to your advantage to be stronger and be more able to give back. So understanding when criticism is good, such as constructive, or bad, destructive, is about identifying a few things first, as there are certain triggers that can take even constructive criticism to a bad place. So something you want to consider when you are receiving feedback from another person, who is it that is giving you the feedback or the criticism? Sometimes we are triggered by certain people in our life, regardless of what they are saying. Because it comes from a certain person, we tend to take it in a negative light or a certain way. And sometimes even a positive light when they perhaps weren't really meaning it. This comes down to assumptions and pre-assumptions and obviously some bias in terms of your relationship with certain people. So understanding who is giving you the information or the feedback is important. And then there's a few other steps we're going to go through next. So another important step is, how is the feedback or the criticism being said? Is it logical and explaining to you where your problems lie with potential ways to solve it? Or is it coming from a strong place of aggression and perhaps hatred? Because that will also help you to understand how you need to respond and whether or not you need to be taking information in, or if you can let it go. Because again, feedback and criticism, you don't always have to take it in. You can choose what you want to learn from and change. Another important factor to look at is when it is being said. Sometimes we are not in the right space to accept any feedback. And when it is then given, we can take it in a completely wrong way. Similarly, sometimes when somebody means well, they might be going through something. And when they say it to us, it can come across as ill-timed advice. Or we can think that they have an ulterior motive around that. And then a very, very important factor to consider when we are receiving criticism or feedback is, what would the other person gain from putting us down? I always think about this when I am not quite sure if the feedback is supposed to be well-meant or not so well-meant. And it usually shows me that I am overthinking things and using a limiting belief called assumption, that I am assuming I know what the other person might be meaning instead of accepting what they have said to me and learn from it and move on. And we do this quite often. Something that could come into play here is also thinking that you know what they're meaning instead of or you know what they're meaning and you think you know what they're thinking when they are telling you these feedback or criticisms. Again, it's important to sometimes take something at face value, see what you can learn from it, accept what you want to let in, and eliminate the elements you don't. So when we take criticism in the right way, we can actually see where we might be making mistakes and learn and see how we can improve upon it. Of course, when it is given in a nicer way, it is easier to accept, although it might still hurt. And it might be a good exercise to mentally prep yourself first and then ask for feedback from others. So you can practice hearing the criticism, taking it in so that you can learn from it and become better, but also practice your reactions towards getting criticism. When we practice and we cultivate a mindset of accepting, when the criticism comes unexpectedly, we are able to control our reactions towards it better. So now that we are mentally ready to take on criticism, what are ways to handle it as the feedback is coming in? I usually work with the 7-step process. I really try to listen and hear what is being said, instead of assuming and thinking I know what the person means and is saying. So that can be with a clarity sentence, such as, if I'm understanding you correctly, you are saying X. And you can just say that back to the person and they can either clarify or say, yes, that is exactly what I'm meaning. That way you are making sure that there's no assumptions, no ideas forming in your head, and you're being very clear on what the feedback actually is. Then I also try and think of what the intention behind what is being said can be. This relates back to my earlier point of what would the other person gain from putting me down. People are not always out to get us, and sometimes they have very valuable advice if we are willing to listen and take in what is being said. And then, and this is a difficult one, I try to put my ego and pride on the back burner. Even if I do not agree, I do try to listen to take in and not listen to reply. And this means I do not get defensive and make excuses. Yes, there is probably a good reason why I chose to do what I did in the way that I did it. But what if the feedback can give me a different perspective and I can do it differently next time and get different or even better results? So this also then leads into the next point, which means I need to try and not take things personally. And as much as I hate to say this, sometimes people will criticize your work or the way we do things, but it doesn't mean that they're criticizing us as the person. It is important to distinguish yourself from your brand when you are building your personal brand so that you can understand when this starts happening, even though this feels a bit counterintuitive. The same way I always talk about learning from our mistakes and seeing failure as an opportunity to learn, so you need to apply the same focus and receiving criticism. Even negative feedback can help you do that. And here you might also need to apply some element of what do you take in and what do you don't. As sometimes there can just be nasty feedback and, well, you can decide not to accept it. Which is why it is important to give yourself some grace and don't be too hard on yourself. You are going to make mistakes as you are taking on this new journey and new way of thinking, and that is okay. You will resonate with some people and some you won't, and that is okay too. Those are the people you don't want because they will drain you. As long as you don't keep making the same mistakes over and over because you aren't learning from the feedback that you're being giving or receiving. Then it's always important to accept criticism with grace as well. And you need to say thank you and that you value the input and opinion from the other person. And if you want, you can ask if you can get back to them once you have implemented the changes and get a follow-up feedback from them. That way, you are opening yourself up for more growth and for more learning. And you're already putting your mind into the opportunity of, I'm going to take this, I'm going to learn, make the changes, and then I'm going to ask for feedback again. So again, you're getting your brain, your mind into the practice of asking for feedback, preparing for a little bit of hurt, but then being able to control your reactions. That should get you into the right headspace to be able to put yourself out there and deal with feedback while you are building your personal brand. So you can stop letting the fear of rejection or the fear of not being good enough stop you from creating your best self, be it for your life, your career, or the business that you are building. I felt this was an important topic to cover under the pillar of personal branding because this is something you need to be prepared for. But it will also define how you communicate with others around this element and showcase your true brand values and voice and what you really stand for. Therefore, I have also included some scripts to help you with this for when you need to respond to digital or in-person feedback. You can be ready to deal with anything. I will add the scripts in the comment section below this post. So with this powerful exercise and by following the process, you can also learn how to deal with feedback and make it beneficial to you. That way, you are able to step into your fearless life.